AIDS represents the gravest threat to worldwide health in the 20th century. According to the World Health Organization, by the year 2000, 30 to 40 million people will be infected with the human immunodeficiency virus, and 25% of these victims will be children. Among society's outcasts, none represent a more tragic scenario than the street child. Abused and abandoned by their families, economic migrants, or orphans, they are forced to survive in a street world of poverty, violence, and neglect. For many street children, prostitution is the means of survival, and drug abuse the means of coping with the hardship of street life. They are choices, often forced, which lead to direct and fatal exposure to AIDS. This mother has come to look for her son at a shelter for runaways outside Bombay's Victoria train station. She is unlikely to see her son again unless he voluntarily returns home.
Children who have been sexually abused, molested, those are the battered children. Those are the type of children that I handle. I mean, living on the street, sometimes many of them are being abused. In different ways, exploited, we might use that term, even sexually abused. We started Snare Southern in '62, mainly for children who are on the road. Today we have about 400 children in 14 different homes, 11 for boys and 3 for girls. I felt, after being there almost 25 years, after around about 10 years, I felt that just giving them an institution, a home, is not enough. And recently, on one of my visits to the States, I found out this halfway house. And with that idea in mind, I started this place with the help of the railways. We started this place is a contact center. It is called Amchik Holi, which means our room, the children, the boys' room. And it was mainly meant for kids who are on the station. They can come here, have a bath, watch TV, play, study, and like advice would be on a take it or leave it basis. If they are happy, there are 2 or 3 social workers here who run this center. Meals are given to them on a subsidized basis, and the railways have been extremely kind, Central Railway, and I think I must give them a lot of praise for this initiative which finally they took in '89. This is the Central Railway, and the place is a small place. I just asked for about a room, 10 by 10, where there's a toilet, there's water, and there's a place that children can come and relax. Children come here from practically all over India. The station is here close by, and this is the first place somehow they get in touch with. And we try as far as possible to send some of these children home.
The Bandra East Community Center provides a range of health and education programs to help street children and those from the slums. Pam D'Souza is a social worker and street child advocate with the Bandra East Community Center in Bombay.
First of all, we have provided a shelter, and now we have provided medical. We are also running some institutions where we have non-formal education, and they can attend the classes there. We have taught them to read. We have also made them open bank accounts, given them awareness programs on how to save money, how to look after themselves, how to be clean, and all the topics on hygiene have been discussed thoroughly with them. Street children are mostly from the stations and small shopping centers and areas like that, where they're not much guided by anybody. Homosexual is a big thing which goes on amongst the boys, which is spreading HIV amongst the street children. There's also prostitution, and they go to Grant Road, where is a red light area, where the children are going and picking up the infection from there as well. Bombay, I think it must be about 40%, because a lot of children have got this HIV.
Dr. P.M. Gurnani is the Bombay project officer for UNICEF and works directly on programs of assistance for the city's swelling street child population.
If you consider a street child as a person who has no shelter and no roots, then a very close estimate would be about 20,000. If you consider the UNICEF definition of a street child, which includes children who are on the streets but they have some roots in the city, they have a family to which they can go back to, then the estimate would go even up to 200,000. We expect the general population to be very sympathetic, I would say even empathetic towards street children. We don't find that in the community. Whether it is the authorities or the neighbors, they usually view street children as children who are miscreants, who are out to create problems, who may be pickpockets, and that's the impression that we get from the community.
Ravi has been living with his parents in a place not very far from Bombay, a place near Raigad. It's on the Bombay-Goa highway. And his parents are both in construction workers. He often complains about his money getting robbed. Every time he earns some money, they try to hide it. He sometimes hides it over here. It never in the pockets because it's robbed immediately. In the joints, in the seams of his shirts and things like that. That's constantly being robbed. Every night practically there's a robbery. And otherwise he's been beaten up pretty often by the police. Whenever last month it was when they had a robbery in the train, so all the boys, Ravi included, were beaten up in order to get information about the theft. The police beat them up with leather belts. Ishtikhar Ahmad is about 12 years old. He used to live with his maternal aunt in his village earlier, and he had run away from home once before and came to Bombay because of the attraction of the city. And he went back home, somebody took him back home. So after that he's been living with his sister who lives in Bombay, in a slum in the suburbs of Bombay. He was working there for about 2 years in a bakery, in which his brother-in-law also works. So while he was there, he too had been working really hard they have various shifts, so he used to work late into the night, starting from 12 noon till 2 at night and things like that. So Ishtikhar found life really difficult over there. Besides that, he was once got burnt in the oven at the bakery. But despite that, although he was seriously burnt, he still had to keep going to work, and his sister and brother-in-law wouldn't let him stay home even when he had to recover. So as a result of that, Ishtikhar ran away from home. It's been about 3 months now that he's been on the streets.
In Bombay, over 50% of the city's 12 million people live in slums. Most do not even have the most basic facilities for living. A Government of India study on child labor in Bombay found that 25% of working children began working between the ages of 6 and 9, and 48% between the ages of 10 and 12. For the street child, all must work to survive, and exploitation, abuse, and disease are common problems.
A few of the dangers that the street children face in this city are related to their occupation. About 40% of these children who are self-employed are into rag picking. And rag picking means going down to these garbage dumps and picking up things from them, selecting them out, and that exposes them to a lot of infections, including probably infections related to sexual transmission like HIV and other STDs.
Most of the street boys are rag pickers, and they pick rags from the drains, which more infection for them, because rag picking is quite a job, going in the drains, picking up from roadsides, and children are not equipped to do that. They have no shoes, no proper clothing equipment, nothing.
The sexual exploitation that I referred to is to a great extent in two forms. One is exploitation that occurs within the street children. The peers who are older exploit the younger street children. And the other is the exploitation that occurs because of prostitution or solicitation. This is one other area where we have sexual exploitation. The third sort of exploitation that we come across is related to more to physical abuse, and that's seen more with street children who are employed in hotels, in other firms or companies, and the employers who physically abuse them.
Dr. I. Escalada is the leading AIDS authority in India. A founder of the Indian Health Organization, he established the first AIDS testing clinic in the country and travels across India to promote AIDS education and better medical care for AIDS patients.
Now there are some of the myths and misconceptions people carry in society, and they try to use those myths and misconceptions on those children which are on the street. One of the very common myth is that if you get afflicted with one of the sexually transmitted disease, you can get rid of it by having sex with a virgin or by having sex with a young child. So they consider that sexually transmitted disease like syphilis or gonorrhea or herpes, it is a superficial disease on their genitals, and they can rub their genital on a virgin child and get rid of the STDs. So they have sex with them. There are some people who carry impression in their mind that if they have a sexual dysfunction or low sexual desire, they can enjoy or they can increase their sexual desire by having sex with children. There are people who are pedophiliacs, and they have some kind of psychological problem to have only sex with children. And there are people who want to show their authority or power, and there is usually a combination of power and myths and misconception and disadvantaged children like this, where they are sex abused, they are exploited.
The little ones, the little boys that are there, we have to take extra care of them because it's the big boys who are using them and also selling them to the people on the stations like shopkeepers and things like that. So we have to look after the little boys so that they don't get involved in this. So we are trying to make a shelter where we'll segregate the little boys. But we're not able to at present because we don't have any shelters for that.
Mukesh has no recollection of his parents. At his young age, he is already a veteran of street life, having lived alone on the streets of Bombay and other cities for several years.
10 साल. He's 10 years old, he says. और इधर क्यों आया बम्बई में? बम्बई में क्यों आया?
झाड़ू लगाता है.
He sweeps the train. So sweeping the train, he reached Bombay. The train between Surat and Bombay. तुम्हारी माँ किधर है?
नहीं.
He doesn't have a mother. बाप किधर? हाँ? भाई बहन कोई है? क्या हुआ उनको?
क्या हुआ?
बिल्कुल याद नहीं माँ बाप का. किधर रहते थे पहले बचपन में?
इधर किधर भी रहते थे.
कहाँ पे भी? जैसे कि?
हाँ.
He has no idea where his parents are. He doesn't remember them at all. He said he used to just live wherever he went, any trains. बम्बई में कभी आया?
एक बार और आया था.
एक बार और आया था. हाँ, बहुत दिन पहले. अच्छा, अभी ये बार कभी आया? कितने दिन पहले?
3 दिन आ गया.
3 दिन. He's come here about 3 days ago to Bombay, and he had come once before several years ago. बम्बई में कुछ कठिनाई है क्या? स्टेशन पे कुछ तकलीफ है तुमको, तुम्हारे लिए? सब ठीक है? पैसा मिलता है बराबर? खाना? हाँ, कोई तुमको मारते हैं या कुछ?
नहीं.
कोई मारता नहीं. लड़के लोग, बड़े भाई लोग?
कोई मारता है.
हाँ?
कोई मारता है.
हाँ, क्यों मारता है?
क्या मालूम. पैसा छीन लेता है.
पैसे छीन लेते. कौन?
कोई बड़े लड़के लोग.
बड़े लड़के लोग. पुलिस लोग? हाँ. He says he doesn't have too much trouble. खाना हमेशा मिलता है हर रोज?
हाँ.
आज सुबह खाया तुमने? नहीं. क्यों?
आज पैसा नहीं था.
अच्छा. When he doesn't have money, he just doesn't eat. Otherwise, not too much trouble. He sweeps trains and moves from one city to another. He says the problems that he has, one major problem is the older boys hitting him, bullying him, and taking the money away from him.
सोने के लिए नहीं मिलता है.
There's no place to sleep. He's not allowed to sleep. क्यों सोने के लिए नहीं मिलता है?
पुलिस लोग डंडा मार के भगा देती है.
The police beat him, hit him with a stick and send him away.
Father Joe Pereira is the founder of CREPA, a drug rehabilitation center for street children.
Many of the children who are also results of professional beggars. There is a whole section of people in the city who live by begging, and very often the kids born of them are dismembered sometimes, made to be disabled in order that they can become powerful means of begging. First thing is that they are introduced to begging at the junctions where the cars, vehicles stop by at the crossroads. Then comes the big bully who lives in the vicinity, comes and collects all the money that the kids have collected and gives them a rupee or two for their food, for their lunch. That's one way of exploitation. The other exploitation is, it's a tremendous denial in India today. People wouldn't really accept that there is such a thing as a child abuse, but it has been there. Children being exploited, sexually exploited, children being made use of even before they could get to the age of reason.
The vast majority of street children are sexually exploited or forced into prostitution in order to survive. In Bombay, there are 100,000 prostitutes. 15,000 of them are children, some as young as 9 years of age. And the great tragedy is that the HIV infection rate is doubling every year.
The most frightening thing about AIDS is it is a disease of young people. It is very easy to convince a son that your father is dying of some cancer or some terminal illness. But it is very difficult to convince a father that your son is dying. Your son is dying a young death, your son is dying of HIV, and then he asks, how did he get HIV? Then you have to explain to him about sex. So all these things was really shocking for me.
This bomb is going to explode very, very soon. As of today, we don't see street children who are AIDS cases and who are hospitalized. But the day is not very far, especially in the city, with the prevalence rate of HIV and the geometrical progression in which we are seeing the infection moving in the city, that the street children who already are a vulnerable group, who do have some sort of high-risk behavior, who are exposed to certain high-risk conditions, would definitely be one of those groups who will probably suffer a lot.
AIDS crisis in the world is bad, but AIDS crisis in Bombay and India is the worst. The doubling time of AIDS cases, number of AIDS cases recorded, has widened in rest of the world except Asia. In Africa it is 5 years doubling time. In America it is 7 years doubling time. In Europe it is 7 years doubling time. In Oceania it is 10 years doubling time. In Asia it is 1 year doubling time. AIDS is the last phase of the HIV disease range. In AIDS there are a lot of opportunistic infections or secondary infections which would not cause infection otherwise in a healthy human being. Now once the virus HIV attacks the human being, it has a special affinity for a cell called CD4 cell, that are a type of white blood cell, and it start eating those white blood cells, and it is like an umbrella which protects the human being in the rain. This cell protects the human being from viruses, fungi, bacteria and parasites. So once this HIV virus attacks, it attacks that umbrella, eats that umbrella becomes the factory of AIDS virus. On the other hand, that umbrella is not protecting the human being. So the human being dies of those several infections, not of HIV. So HIV doesn't kill anybody per se. They are the secondary opportunistic infections or secondary cancers which kill the patient.
We occasionally have a health checkup where we test their blood for HIV, but very often the boys are not very regular at the center, so they may or may not come back to follow up and really to follow up their tests to verify whether they really are positive.
The risk of HIV to the street children is higher than that of their adult counterpart. It is because of three factors. Number one, because their male or female both, their anus as well as their genital part is quite tight, and with penetration it will break quite easily. There will be a element of trauma or bleeding, and HIV virus enters very fast from traumatic points. Secondly, they will not have any kind of authority or power to ask their male partner or their abusers to use any protective measures like condom. And third thing is, they have no access to the treatment. If they are suffering from any other STD or any other problem, they have no access to go. They don't know where to go. They will not be entertained by people properly. So if they are suffering from one STD and then they are exposed to HIV, then they are at higher risk than their adult counterpart.
Among the children who know that there is something gone wrong with a child who has prostituted or who has, as a result, got the HIV infection, there are no distinctions made openly, but they do know that there is something gone wrong there.
One who does know is Ravi, a 16-year-old boy who tested positive for HIV after numerous visits to Bombay's notorious red light district.
घर पर रोज झगड़ा होता है, बात से जो ही जपते थे। अगर बाप को तो औरत की तरफ भी जाता है ना रिश्ता, इसके लिए वो उसकी वजह से मेरे को बाहर में वेट लगते थे, मेरे को अच्छा नहीं लगता था, घर छोड़ना पड़ा इसके। ये गुजरात गया था ना, गुजरात में मलेरिया पकड़ लिया था, मुझे भी नहीं मालूम क्या मलेरिया होता है। जब मैं इधर सेंटर वाले लोग के पास आया, मैं बोला चलो अभी एक ही सहारा है, आपको सेंटर वाले लोग जानते हैं, इसके लिए मैं दीदी लोग से मिले, वो लोग लेके गए दवा खाने में, वो लोग पहले मलेरिया इंजेक्शन लिए, दवा पानी कराए, वो लोग बोले फूड चेकअप करवा लो, इसके लिए तो जेटर हॉस्पिटल में तो करवाए, इसके बाद उधर से कैंप में भेजे, कैंप से 2-3 बार उधर पूछ लिया, इसके बाद उसने बोला जाओ जय में चले जाओ।
The outreach programs that Kripa does has brought us into contact with children who are HIV positive. We are looking at them as potential patients of long-term treatment. I am looking at introducing some kind of holistic approach to health and to bring them into these kind of treatment facilities. So far, there is a running away syndrome, denial and running away from the main problem. You know, they are not able to really feel the impact of the HIV positive syndrome.
Children on the street have very little support system, support service, and there are very few organizations which are involved in a lot of support work to the street children. So they are at mercy of state system. Like a child very critical lying somewhere as an unconscious child may be brought in by a wireless van of the police department. But if the child is in between a healthy child and a very sick child, he may not be attended by anybody. But probably most of them die on the street unattended or very little attendance from somebody. But if and when they reach hospitals, public places, then they do get some support and some care.
Dr. Galata and his medical team at the International Health Organization have won international acclaim for the Sahali Project, which educates prostitutes about sexually transmitted diseases, including AIDS. Through informal workshops, free medical checkups, and widespread distribution of condoms, the message of safe sex is slowly reaching through the sex worker industry. AIDS projections for India are catastrophic. According to the International Health Organization, India already has over 2 million HIV-infected persons and predict a staggering 30 to 50 million cases of HIV infection by the year 2000. The IHO is working against staggering odds, but every AIDS workshop held, every prostitute who uses a condom is seen as a crucial victory. The most explosive areas for HIV infection is the sex industry. Galata and his team know that the battle against AIDS begins here.
And we have created a project called Project Saheli, helping the sex workers through the peers. And we choose one Saheli, that is a Hindi word for friend, out of 25 girls, which are sex workers. To monitor 10 Sahelis, we select one elderly woman, which is from the brothel manager's cadre, and she is called Thai. Thai means elder sister. To monitor 10 Thais, we select one Bai, means mother, from the brothel owner's cadre. So Bai, Thai, Saheli, the component of 2,500 girls is covered by one Bai above, and we have a social worker from IHO. Our idea is that if and when we withdraw from that area, work will still go on because they're sensitized. And what we have seen is, by and large, if they are in our project for more than 1 year, they're very, very happy, they support you. They have seen that they are not getting fresh sexually transmitted diseases, they are not getting any pregnancies.
The success of the Sahali project depends on the support and trust of the elder sex workers. Without it, the IHO will lose the battle to control AIDS in the red light districts.
हाँ पुलिस लोग डरते कि नहीं पुलिस लोग डरते कि नहीं कार्ड देखे
पुलिस को डराया
नहीं डराया क्यों हफ्ता अभी दे रहे क्या अभी नहीं दे रहे
नहीं दिया
मांगने को आए तो क्या बोला नहीं देंगे
पूछा ही नहीं है मैंने
उधर नहीं पूछा नहीं पुलिस ने
इधर आया तो पूछा नहीं
अच्छा डर गया तुम्हारे से
नहीं हमारा कार्ड भी किधर देखा वो लोग
अभी बोला उसको कार्ड अभी बोलना हम लोग नहीं देंगे बोला हमारे पास अभी खाने पीने का हमारा काम है तुम लोग कोई चालू करेंगे तो फिर सब लोग चालू करेंगे ना
In a nation where open discussion about sex is still taboo, Dr. Galata is seen as a controversial figure. For many, his impromptu classes in the streets and slums across Bombay will be the only sex education they ever receive.
Educating the street child or prostitutes or young prostitutes is not very difficult. By and large, people did not work in this area, and they made an impression that it is very difficult to reach them because they are illiterate, they will not understand, they are doing all this thing for their enjoyment or for getting money, which is untrue. If we make efforts, we found it very easy. They are very supportive to such moment. There is no inhibition, and they are hungry of love, affection, or caring attitude of the society, which they never got in the past. So if we go to them as compared to the organized children like in schools or colleges or other places, the street children are more receptive.
Priti Patkar is the founder of Prirana, an orphanage and school for the children of prostitutes.
The children coming to the school are children from in and around this area. But the children that we work with, that Prerna works with, is only children of the prostitutes. And we started work by initiating, getting these children to attend this municipal school, and later on moved on to other issues related to children and that of women in prostitution. So our first activity was definitely with children. So we said, let us try and see what are the issues related to children. It was at that stage we realized that society in general never took this up or never saw it as an issue. For them, well, you know, there are the children of the prostitutes and their future is going to be the red light area only. Whereas we thought that their future need not be the red light area. You know, the girl child need not necessarily end up into prostitution. 99% of these children get into prostitution, the girl children, and the boy child either ends up becoming a eunuch prostitute or is sexually exploited by men, by homosexual men, or end up into underworld activities.
मेरा नाम है पूनम, मेरी माँ धंधा करती है, मुझे पसंद नहीं है और मैं घर पे ना काम नहीं करूँगी ना किसका, तो मेरी माँ मारती है। मेरी माँ खाना पकाती है ना जब सुबह में, तो मेरे को है ना सब सामान लाने को बोलती है और है ना घर पे सब औरत लोग क्या बोलते हैं, घर जो है ना मेरा पान ला के दे, वो क्या ला के दे, वो सब बोलते हैं।
This center and our effort is a drop in the ocean. There are thousands of children who need these services, and we are hardly catering to about 500 children in the red light area. Now, for us, this center means a hope for those children who definitely want a change in their lifestyle, a hope for those mothers who do not want their children to enter into prostitution or the underworld activities.
मुझे वहाँ पे रहने के टाइम मेरे भाई को संभालना पड़ता है, चाय बनाना पड़ता है, सवेरे जल्दी उठना मांगता है, और दूसरे कोई आएगा घर पे तो मुझे काम करने बोलता है, कभी दारू लाने भेजता है, कभी निरोध लाने भेजता है, कभी पान, कभी सिगरेट ऐसा भेजते हैं।
We run a creche, we run a night care center for the children of the prostitutes, where the children come at 5 in the evening and stay the whole evening, the night, and leave the next morning. For the children, like we just did the study for UNICEF on the girl children, and we sat down to formally interview our children for that study. And I mean, what our children, I would definitely like to voice what our girl children had said. One of the questions in the research study was, how do you find the creche? We have some of the older girl children attending the creche, and in their words it was that, well, here we are safe because once we are in the community during the business hours, we find the customers making passes at us, whereas here there's nobody who does that to us.
नहीं, मुझे रात को सोने के लिए बहुत डर लगता है क्योंकि सब लोग जल्दी सो जाते हैं, लेकिन मैं जल्दी नहीं सोती, मुझे सपना गिरता है, इसलिए मैं डरती हूँ। मिलता नहीं, वो रोज सवेरे आता है, रात को काम पे जाता है, सवेरे आता है। मुझे यहाँ से लेके जाने के टाइम मुझे हलवा पूरी दिलाया और वहाँ पे बिठाया और यहाँ से अंदर गया। मेरा अब्बा क्लब काम करता है, यानी जुगाड़। मुझे मालूम है कि मेरा अब्बा जुगाड़ करता है, मेरी मम्मी ने बताया कि तेरा अब्बा जुगाड़ खेलता है। मुझे सिर्फ मेरा पप्पा चाहिए, पहले वाला पप्पा, ये दूसरा जुगाड़ खेलने वाला पप्पा नहीं मांगता, क्योंकि जो गंदे गंदे आदमी लोग को पकड़ा जाता है, जो गांजा चरस दारू बेचते हैं, उन लोग को पकड़ के दिखलाना है, इसलिए।
For the street girl trapped in prostitution, escaping can be almost as dangerous as the work itself. Many have fled incest or been sold by their own family into the brothels. Others are kidnapped or lured into the sex trade. Family abuse, corrupt officials, and ruthless brothel keepers all conspire to keep the young prostitute in sexual bondage.
It's very difficult where child prostitutes are concerned, because I mean, after almost 9 years of work in the red light area, even today it's very, very difficult to have an open dialogue with child prostitutes, because there's always somebody or the other who's observing her movements, who is controlling her own life, and there's always somebody who will stop you from getting in contact with her. So it's very difficult. It's only the adult prostitutes who are free, operating more with much more independence, that we can cater to as of today. Child prostitutes is very, very difficult.
This small hut and bed is typical of the beds used by an estimated 100,000 prostitutes in the city of Bombay.
For a child prostitute, she comes in, she's bought for anything between 5,000 and 15,000. Once she is into a brothel, she gets, depends on how willing she is to enter into this profession, and obviously she's oblivious of her surroundings, and she's definitely raped till a time where she gives in very willingly to entertain customers. Every penny that she earns goes to the brothel keeper. Her total movement is restricted and is controlled by the brothel keeper and her henchmen. Supposing she's bought for 5,000, the brothel keeper considers that 5,000 as a loan taken by that girl. So she continues to work till she repays not only that loan amount, but also the interest on that loan. And the interest and the original amount never comes to an end. So she's for almost 5 to 10 years, she works for this brothel keeper.
There are a lot of complex problems, and one of the complex problems is incest. There is no law on incest in this country. So if the child is subjected to incest and feeling unsecured at home and run away from home and become a street child or child prostitute, and then we rescue and we send to children home, the child's custody is given back to her parents, back to her lawful father or lawful parents, despite our notes on the record that he is or she is a victim of incest. And if the custody is given back to father, father is again abusing the child or daughter and sell the daughter again to prostitution.
The rate of girls being deceived and then brought into prostitution is much, much higher than girls being directly sold by their parents for prostitution.
Practically all the girls who have those who don't come into contact with a social work organization or anybody who would get them a job in some other line, practically all the girls otherwise would go into prostitution. Besides that, a lot of new girls coming into the station are sold by the regular women who live here. Women and other males who also function as pimps. So they're sometimes sold into the red light district.
But supposing there is a girl who is rescued, what the government does, or what according to the act is done with the girl, is that she's kept in a home, and then as and when the police trace her parents, she's reached back to her parents. Now here the only problem is that if her parents refuse to accept her, what happens is the next day you find her again in the red light area, maybe in some other brothel.
I have seen that in the last 15 years of my active involvement in drug abuse and the abject kind of poor people who have really hit the streets as a result of addiction and as a result of people just being born within a setup of trafficking and all that. I have seen that there is a shift from a very affluent kind of abuser of drugs to the street child. So today, if we are looking at working in the field of drug abuse, we are all the time looking at a person who has hit the streets.
Mohindro, age 18, is a recovering heroin addict. While undergoing treatment at the Kripa Center, he learned that he is HIV positive, the result of sharing needles with other addicts. Weakened by years of drug addiction and now AIDS, he is unlikely to see his 21st birthday.
Basically, I came to Kripa for my drug addiction treatment, and where it is mandatory to have a test, since I belong to the high-risk group. And when they tasted it, it was found positive. And it was not something very new to me because I was all the time aware of it, since I've been sharing needles with so many drug addicts in Imphal. And I've been informed that most of the addicts in Imphal are 90% of them are under high-risk group. So when they the doctor, my personal doctor, and when my personal counselor told me about the result, it was nothing very new to me, because I was under the impression that there are all the chances of getting it. See, by the time I realized it was already too late, and my addiction is is such that, like, see, when I'm tucking out and when I'm for the drug, see, I cannot think anything other than my using. So, like, I cannot even wait for a few minutes to go and look around for a new syringe.
Most of my recovered addicts and alcoholics become very powerful wounded healers. Very similar to the story of the prodigal son, of where a child who had felt lost feels now found again. A child who was lost, a child who was dead to the world, comes alive.
For my addictions treatment, I had to undergo certain steps which equally apply for my HIV. See, my addiction also is a kind of a disease which is incurable, which is progressive, which is very fatal. And see, likewise, even this HIV is something which I cannot do about it. It is an incurable disease, and what can I do about it now, rather than accept it? See, when I go back home, I would like to volunteer myself with an associations which is already there in Manipur. Most of the members are actively involved in the HIV project. So I intend, going there and join them, spread the message all over the place. It's better that since I got it, I go and spread around the news, spread around the message that before it is too late, at least those people who are not infected, especially the drug addicts, they can be saved, even if they want to use needles, or even if they want to continue with their drugging habits. It's not that I'm encouraging them, but even if they want to use, they must make a point that they do not share any needles any longer, because the chances is very high.
Well, I'd like to say that these are also human beings, and I do feel that they have a right to education, food, and good looking after or shelter. And I do feel that government as well as other organizations could help us to help them.
We're moving in that direction of collaboration, different organizations, moving in collaboration with even the government, the police, the railways, the BMC, because these are government organizations, and we non-government or voluntary organizations, to collaborate with some of these people, to help. Like, there is a little bit of an awareness now of an interdependence and inter-collaboration. And this is what hopefully, like after a few years, we should be able to do something as far as these kids go.
It's very crucial that the people in the world, in India, in Bombay, should be more sensitive towards the problem of street children. And it's really important for all of us to ensure that we get the message across to every person in the community. Please be sympathetic, please be empathetic, please understand the difficulties that these children have undergone. They have come from broken families, they have had their share of hardships, and though they require our love and our compassion.
हम लोग के लिए ऐसे एक सेंटर वेटर खोले दिए जाए, हम लोग रहने के लिए, खाने धोने के लिए, आराम के लिए.
Each day, hundreds of new children join the ranks of Bombay's swelling street child population. The fate of these children will be harsh, for alone and living on the streets is no place for any human being, particularly not a child. Worldwide, the HIV infection rate among street children is growing at an alarming rate. In major world cities, where studies have been conducted, street children have an HIV infection rate of between 20 and 40%. It is one more danger facing the street child.